Well, after the U.S. recently imposed tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles, a question looms for Canada. Do we follow suit, or do we welcome cheap and readily available Chinese EVs to our market? Brian Kingston is president and CEO of the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association. Brian, thanks for being with us.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So let's start right there. We could match the U.S. tariffs and block those EVs, or at least make them more expensive, harder to get in this market. Is that the right thing to do in your view?
Well, look, we have made huge progress as a country over the past 3 years in winning new investment into the automotive industry, most of which is dedicated to electrification. We're talking about over $40 billion in new investment. So, look, we got to make sure that the North American automotive industry succeeds in this transformation to electric. And if that means ensuring we have the right protections in place to protect ourselves from dumped or illegally subsidized vehicles, we should be prepared to do that. This is too important for the Canadian economy to take a risk.
So all of that sounds very reasonable. I guess the heart of this problem is the U.S. is taking a super hard line on China, not just with EVs, with a whole bunch of things, Brian. And Canada's going to have to decide whether we follow suit. Obviously, we're very integrated in North America in our auto industry. Is there any way for us to get offside America, or is that just a fool's errand? Should we just do what they do because we need to keep integration?
We absolutely have to work with the Americans every step of the way. This automotive industry is highly integrated, highly connected to the United States, and virtually every other sector of the Canadian economy is as well. Not only that, but we are heading to a review of our trilateral free trade deal, the Canada-United States-Mexico agreement, in 2026. We have to be standing shoulder to shoulder with the Americans. If we are perceived as being out of step on some of our policies, that will be a problem for us in the context of these discussions. So now is the time. We depend on alignment, we depend on integration. Let's work with our American partners. Taking
your point well, that we don't want dumping of products, in other words, Chinese product landing here at below a profit, because that'll undercut the market in general. If we agree to that, but is there a case to be made that to get us to our electric vehicle goals, we should have cheap and readily available EVs, and China has them for sale? That might, in other words, a different agenda than what we're talking about, which is aligning with the U.S. and maintaining our existing auto infrastructure. But if the goal is getting us to our EV targets, isn't Chinese-made EVs the way to go?
Well, look, this is exactly the disconnect that we see right now on the federal government approach to electrification in the automotive industry. On the one hand, we have an EV sales mandate which dictates the ratio of vehicle sales in this country up to 2035. It has no regard whatsoever for Canada's industrial policy or where these vehicles come from. That is a problem. If you look at what the Americans are doing through the Inflation Reduction Act and other policies, they are taking a coordinated approach to achieving environmental outcomes while also bolstering their industrial base. So let's look at what the Americans are doing and take that approach. We can achieve our environmental objectives, but we sure should not be doing that at the cost of our industrial base and our automotive industry.
Brian, it's so good to have you for this. Appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Brian Kingston is president and CEO of the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association. Time for the takeaway and the politics of convenience. Where you buy liquor and beer is a hot topic in this country. You might be forgiven for thinking we have more important issues to grapple with, like a moribund economy, out-of-whack housing market, overstressed healthcare, just to name a few. And yet, time and again, politicians return to this all-important question of how we'll get our drink of choice. This week, it was Ontario with an announcement that will accelerate the timeline to allow booze sales in convenience stores in the province, something that was slated to happen in 16 months anyway. But to get there by September, the province is willing to buy out the contract of the privately owned beer store. It's held the rights to sell beer in Ontario until now. Cost of that sped up timeline, almost $250 million. That's just to settle the contract and doesn't count lost revenue to the province from the actual sales themselves. Ontario isn't offside in this evolution. Most provinces have been gradually opening up access to alcohol, allowing wine and grocery stores and smaller retailers as well. And in the case of Alberta, moving to a privately run system long ago. Given that government control of alcohol sales is a relic of prohibition, the real question isn't why it's happening, but why it took so long. We know the answer, of course. Governments have become addicted to the sale of something that many customers are literally addicted to. And we all look the other way on the moral quandary of raising massive tax revenue off the backs of our most vulnerable citizens. Making this change ahead of schedule and at great cost might score political points, or it might be a lightning rod for discontent about spending and mismanagement of tax dollars. Who knows? What we do know is that the science around alcohol is pretty clear. It's a deadly substance that is far from benign for many. Making it more accessible might seem like a weird thing to do. My takeaway? Alcohol is bad for us, but it is legal. Maybe the best case scenario, if we're going to consume it, is to take our governments right out of the equation. That's Taking Stock for this week. I'm Amanda Lang. Thanks for being with us.